Hey everybody, Tony D with a screenwriter's take on an old movie by request called Return of the Living Dead. Now, normally I have a terrible memory for certain movies, but this movie really stuck in my brain. It's a zombie movie, came out in '85, and I have done zero research on this. I just remember most of the movie. So, Return of the Living Dead was a zombie movie, and I'll give you the non-spoiler review, as I often do with a screenwriter's take. The non-spoiler review. This is a fun, campy movie about zombies and punks, because '85 was sort of the end of the punk movement. It was popular enough that Hollywood and started to put punks and everything. But really, this was sort of the peak of punk as a trend. By the late '80s, punk was sort of getting old to put in the movies, and they'd always be, these rude a-holes with mohawks who would push people around, and be a lot of times they were the villains. In this case, they're a bunch of punk kids out on a night, and they're showing up to get their friend who works at a warehouse, and the warehouse gets delivered. Basically, they get delivered a secret government container, which then starts the zombie plague in their town. And it's a very interesting take on zombies. I think from a zombie, if you're going to say there's a historical zombie movie, this is one of them, actually, because this kind of changed zombie movies in an interesting way. And I'll get into the details in the spoiler review. But in zombie movies, this was really the movie that pushed the idea of zombies eating brains specifically, and not just human flesh. In Night of the Living Dead, they just ate people. But in this movie, it was about the brains of their targets for a very specific reason. And also, it was the first zombie movie I saw where the zombies actually talked, and not just said words, but like actually conveyed ideas. And so that was a big change. And it's just a crazy ride. They actually made a sequel to Return of the Living Dead, which wasn't nearly as good, but it did have the same cast, and they just put them in completely different roles, which was interesting. I put the sequel as a good try, but didn't quite work. But the first movie is kind of a classic, really, in my mind. It has so many kind of iconic scenes, and the zombies just get worse and worse as the people try to survive. But it's a fun movie with revelations, which I'll go into now in my spoiler review. So if you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it. It's a classic zombie movie. If you're a big fan of zombies, see Return of the Living Dead. Shut off this review and go see it. And then spoiler review. Okay, here's the spoiler review. The reasons this is such, I feel, an important movie in the world of zombies is, first off, the zombies talk. And that doesn't happen early in the movie. It doesn't happen until about the second act. But what happens in the movie is the guys get this canister, and the two guys who open it up, it's like the punk guy who their friends are waiting for, and the guy who runs the warehouse, and they get blasted by this government chemical. And it was supposed to be this government chemical that they sprayed on marijuana crops to destroy them, which was a great tie-in, a great little bit of detail in the movie that the government basically caused it all. So they become infected, but we don't know it because they continue to talk and interact. But over the course of the movie, course of the first act, they get more and more pale. They start to have pains. They start not to feel well, and they don't understand what's happening to them. And it's a great revelation that they're dead. Meanwhile, the canister that they open eventually opens, and there's an actual zombie in it. For some reason, the government canned up a zombie, and I guess you can say that the reason they canned up the zombie was because they couldn't really kill these things. And that's part of the great thing in this movie. The zombies are almost impossible to kill because when the gas floods into the warehouse is for medical supplies, and they have a cadaver and like a half a dog. Like they have a dog that apparently was used for, I don't know, vets or whatever, that they cut in half so you could see his body, but they preserved all the pieces. Well, when they do that, the dog comes back to life because of the gas, and like the half dog is like, "Rrr, rrr, 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 rrr," and they try to kill it, but it just won't die. And then a cadaver, the same thing happens. The cadaver gets up and starts screaming, and they try to kill that, and they cut it into pieces. And they even kill it in the brain, but it just won't die. So, they're dealing with that while they're also dealing with their friends who are starting to realize that they're dead and they don't know what to do, and they're in horrible pain. Like every time they move, they realize they're in more and more pain. And they've been sitting down, and they get up at one point and they realize that all the blood in their bodies, like a dead body would, has run to their backs. And that's So, it's a great, smart screenplay, even though the characters are kind of dumb because they're all crazy punks who don't realize what's going on. And then they make the situation worse because eventually they get to the crematorium and they burn the body, the cadaver and the dog, in an attempt to finally destroy them. But then the smoke goes out of the crematorium, and then it rains on a graveyard where the crematorium is, and then those zombies come up out of the grave, and it just makes it worse. They've succeeded in doing is spreading the zombie plague, which is a great heightening. And during this sort of heightening, the cops come, which is also another smart thing, because that's exactly what would happen, right? The cops would eventually come. And the zombies, of course, kill them. They just don't stand a chance. They try shooting them, and it just all goes wrong. And some point in the movie, and this is a classic line if you've ever seen the movie, is one of the zombies grabs the radio, and the dispatcher says something. Are you okay out there? What's going on? And the zombie just goes, "Send more cops." And they do, which is something they would do. So, but the key moment in this entire crazy movie is they're trapped in the crematorium after, some of their friends have been killed by this point. They're trapped a group of them are trapped in the crematorium, and a few of them are still trapped in the original warehouse with the two guys who got infected, who are now becoming zombies. They're now in such pain. They're getting more and more frustrated. And the people who stayed with them, the girlfriend and somebody else, are now becoming more and more afraid of them. And they start getting crazy. So they're trapped. This other group's trapped in the crematorium, and they have one of the zombies, and they tie it to like it's only like half a woman, and she's been in the ground for years. And they ask her, "Why do you want to eat brains?" And she says, "Brains make the pain go away." And that's an amazing revelation in the world of zombies, right? It's like they don't just eat brains. They're just not mindless. They have a reason to eat the brains, because when they eat the brains for a short time, their pain of being dead goes away. And I thought that was a great revelation in the movie. Really, the movie is, on its surface, kind of very dumb and crazy and campy, but that moment is a great revelation in sort of the world of zombies. And I've always liked that. The height of the movie, they really have no place to go because they sort of paint themselves in a corner. So the ending of the movie is really the only place you can go in a zombie movie like this. At the end of the movie, the warehouse guy, they kill him as a zombie because he's just gone nuts and tries to eat somebody. I think he successfully does. I think he successfully kills somebody. And then the zombie from the basement gets out. It's really tough to kill these zombies. And the people in the crematorium are trying to get out, but it's hopeless. But eventually, they go into the roof, I think, of the warehouse or the crematorium, and the boyfriend, who now has been all effed up as a zombie, breaks through. And the people in the crematorium are getting overwhelmed. And at that moment, the United States Air Force comes in and just nukes the entire town and kills everybody. And the ending of the movie is, the government sort of covering it up, but it's raining and the chemicals spread again, and it's all going to happen even worse this time. So that was a great heightening and a great ending to a horror movie, a fun movie where everybody dies. And that's why the sequel, even though it's not good, the sequel is really not worth your time. But the fact that they bring back the entire cast, give them new characters, not the entire cast, but most of them, give them new characters and try to make a sequel, that was a good move. I think that would be a great franchise to reboot. You could do that first movie. You could reboot it, bring back the entire cast, completely different characters, really spend some money on it. I think it's one of the few movies that the few movie franchises I would reboot. I would reboot Return of the Living Dead. I think it's worth it. I think there's a lot of detail there you could explore. The idea that you absolutely cannot kill these zombies, that the chemical just spreads everywhere. I don't know what you'd do for a third movie. I mean, obviously the second movie would be a heightening of that. It would be the army getting involved and they're just completely overwhelmed. But I think for the third movie, you'd have to eventually come up with a way that they'd come up with some chemical to neutralize the chemical that has turned them into zombies. It's a great little film. I think if you added also to the elements of the George Romero movies, the idea that, like in Dawn of the Dead, where they're going back to the things they remember, when they go back to the mall in Dawn of the Dead, things like that. If you add those sort of metaphorical stuff to the zombies, like, the whole zombie idea of people on their smartphones would be a great thing to exploit now. So you could have zombies that are still doing their smartphone thing. But you could add this sinister addition to it that they have a little bit of intelligence left. I wrote a screenplay, actually, along these lines called Toxic Zombie Blues. And it plays with that idea. The zombies are totally with their intelligence. They completely keep their intelligence. And it is more chemical based, like in this movie, but it's a different sort of chemical situation, and it's sort of campy in that vein of Return of the Living Dead, which is fun. They have fun with the movie. It's back when movies were fun and not so serious. I think it would be a great thing to return to. But if you haven't seen it, Return of the Living Dead, a classic, in my view, one of the classic zombie movies of all time. I think you'll have fun if you watch it.